Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, the Director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we'll discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue, and finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. Today's topic is autism and how parishes can better serve families with family members on the autism spectrum. Today, we have several guests. Will you please introduce yourselves?
My name is Tammy Stauber. I live in Butler County, and I happen to have a wonderful son who is 20 years old, and he has the diagnosis of autism.
My name is Nicholas Hardesty.
And I'm Amy Hardesty.
We have 3 children. 2 of them are autistic. Dominic is 8 years old, and Thomas is 3.5.
I'm Carolyn, and I have a son that's 15 with autism spectrum disorder.
So, Tammy, could you tell us your story, please?
Kyle, we've had quite a journey with him. He's the light of our world. He's got a great sense of humor. He's wicked smart. So he's just a wonderfully rounded young man. My husband is a cradle Catholic, and I was raised Lutheran. After Kyle was born, I went through RCIA and totally embraced the Catholic faith along with my husband. But we were sad that with Kyle's sensory issues, he really can't handle loud noises like clapping and high-pitched women's voices. So we were afraid that church would not be in our future for him, and really sad that he would not be able to celebrate the sacraments. We felt like we had 2 choices in our family. We could either stay home and not go to church, or we could go to church and try to do the best we could. And so we would go and we would stand in the back of Mass, and Kyle would sometimes fidget or sometimes pace a little bit and try not to be stared at and do the best that we could and not interfere with other people's quiet worship.
All right, let's turn to Nick and Amy. Tell us about your family.
We have 3 children, and our 2 boys are both autistic. We've been bringing them to Mass since they were itty bitty babies, and we try to make it a point to make sure that we are keeping them engaged and keeping them in the sanctuary. We don't like to overutilize cry rooms.
They throw fits sometimes. If a certain thing isn't just so, then our oldest son with autism, really vocal about that. He really wants to have something to put in the collection basket when it comes along. So if we forget the envelope one weekend, that's a really big deal. And we're going to hear about that, and all the families around us are going to hear about that too. And so, we just try to be mindful of the triggering things.
But it's hard when you're trying to keep 3 children quiet in the pew and entertained and focused, and you're also trying to focus on the Mass. Sometimes remembering the triggers falls through the cracks. For a Mass to go smoothly is a huge triumph for us.
Yeah.
So how do people react around you, and how has that affected your desire to attend Mass?
We've had people around us say things like, for some families, it would be better for them to just stay home. Or, don't they know that there's a cry room?
Right.
Or, wow, it's a real circus in here. They're saying these things.
Right.
Under their breath so we can hear.
And your heart just sinks, and you just don't ever want to go to Mass ever again.
So Nick and Amy, let's get back to that comment, don't they know there's a cry room? I can certainly see people thinking in their heads, okay, I'm glad they're trying to take their kids to church, but if they're being disruptive and we're trying to pray, they should be bringing their kids to the cry room. What's your response to that? How do we help people understand?
Yeah, Bob, for us, the cry room just makes things worse. It also depends on the cry room. Where we go to Mass more often now, it's not really a cry room so much as like the foyer of the church with a bunch of chairs in it. And so if I bring my sons back there, once they go through those big doors and they're in the foyer/cry room, they're not in church anymore as far as they're concerned. So they want to run around and they want to play and they want to climb on things and they want to yell. And it's just an out of control moment at that point.
Yeah, they're not learning anything about behaving in church.
Yeah, we're trying to teach them what it's like to be in Mass and to celebrate with everyone else. And we just can't teach them that if we're constantly going back to the cry room.
There is a point at which we don't let them be so disruptive that it's
Yeah.
unbearable.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like we never utilize the cry room. It's just we reserve the cry room for when it's absolutely necessary and nothing else is working.
Yeah, but that takes understanding from the people around us.
Okay, Carolyn, can you tell us your story, please?
Well, my son is 15, and unfortunately, I know families, they've stopped bringing their child with autism or another disability. It's because the families know what's expected and they don't want to interrupt the mass. So they would stop bringing their child rather than just sit outside the whole time. But for my son, he has something called a proprioceptive disorder. So he always wanting physical input. If you're sitting in a car for hours and you want to get out, you just feel like you got to stretch your legs. Well, he feels like that all over his body a lot. So he always wants to be moving, fidgeting. And so that's a real struggle for him in mass to stay still. A lot of times people look at you strange. We always find a seat at the back so as few people can see us as possible. And, if he starts making noise, which is sometimes a problem, then we step out. It's hard, but I realize a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. One time, somebody in front of us said something that upset him a lot, and he could not get it out of his head, and he started screaming. So, of course, we took him out, but, it's either what terrible things are you doing to your child or what terrible parents you are. So that experience has happened a few times to us. I think it's best for other people not to look. If you do eventually come back into mass or you see him some other time later, just be friendly, not like you're bad people.
So, Tammy, do you have any advice for the regular person in the pew on how they might be more helpful to families like yours?
I guess in church, I would ask people just to be kind and try not to be judgmental. You don't know what's going on. And he told us that he just wants people to treat him age appropriately. So if he was a teenager, to just say, hey, Kyle, how are you? A lot of people tend to, they use the voice like, oh, how are you? Assume intelligence with our kids. Our kids are so smart. They can't talk, or maybe they echo, but they're so smart and they want to be treated just like you and me. Kyle told us it's important to spend more time with Jesus. He's so spiritual. He wants a spiritual community. People who would sit near us in mass before they got to know us told us later they were intimidated. Kyle's just a little fidgety. He wasn't aggressive or anything, but they were kind of afraid of him, like during the sharing of the peace.
Sure.
And once they got to know him and see him with his dad ushering, and he became more ingrained in the community, they would tell us later, like, oh my gosh, he's a fine young man, and I'm sorry that I was ever afraid to approach him.
So, Nick and Amy, hopefully we're helping people to understand that immediately going to the cry room at the first sense of disturbance is not the most helpful thing for trying to teach them how to be quiet. How can someone who is around a family with children who are difficult, what is the best way to respond or be helpful?
I think it's just to be affirming. We've already kind of talked about people who say judgmental things. Sometimes we've also experienced people on the other side of the spectrum where they try to overhelp. Mm-hmm. They try to give one of our children candy. Well, now one of them has it and the other one don't, and it might not be something that they are able to eat.
Don't ever give.
Or they try to give them toys, or they try to pick them up or talk to them directly. Like our oldest son, who's autistic, if you try to look him in the eye and have a conversation and he doesn't know you, he's going to reject that. The sweet spot is to be affirming and welcoming. During the sign of peace, just to say an encouraging word. You guys are doing a great job. Keep up the good work. Or after Mass, just to thank us for bringing our children. Or we're so glad you're here. Or don't you worry about those kids, like that usher said.
Yeah.
That is really the best way that anyone can help us. And just to be understanding. A lot of times it's a really big struggle just to get to Mass. And so by the time we're there, sometimes we're pretty exhausted. So I might not turn around and address every disturbance because at that point I'm just done. Well, I'm sure from the outside that looks like I'm a parent that doesn't care that my children are being disrupted because I'm not addressing every disruptive thing they do. So it just takes some understanding to realize you don't always know what's going on in the life of that family.
And I think the general message here is don't judge. Assume that you don't have all the information. And I think that applies even to people who don't have kids with autism. There's sensory processing disorder. There's all sorts of non-autistic behavioral difficulties that make church very challenging. And so the key there is just to assume the best of people.
Yeah.
I think if you just notice unusual behaviors, just smile at the parents, and then after Mass or during the sign of peace, be friendly like you would be to anyone, and say, goodbye, I hope you have a good day, and just be a friendly person. I think that's the best help.
Okay, so Tammy, you already told me that you've had a sensory-friendly Mass at your parish. So tell us what that's like.
We would set up audio-visual equipment in the big conference room, separate from the worship space, and live simulcast the Mass into the conference room. And so any families who felt like their loved one needed to pace in the back of the room or fidget, whatever that needed to be, they could be in that room, again, worshiping in community, but still being able to follow the Mass. That's one thing we hear from our kids a lot is, I may not be speaking to you, I may not be making eye contact, but I'm always listening. So they're taking in the Mass, they're taking in the prayers, the liturgy, the homily. Kyle may not have looked like in that room if he was fidgeting or walking around that he was paying attention, but he would come home and he would know the message from the homily. That very first day that we had the sensory-friendly Mass, there were a lot of tears in the room, happy tears. We were looking around and thinking, oh my gosh, we can finally worship without stares or glares, where we could relax a little bit and take a breath and hear the Word of God and not be worrying about a sensory trigger in the moment. We did feel a little segregated, but we were able to come to church. Again, it was either stay home or worship in community, and we chose worship in community.
So Nick and Amy, do you think there are things that a parish might do as a whole to make a Mass experience easier for those parishioners who have children who might be on the spectrum?
Some parishes kick around the idea of designating one of their Masses as a sensory-friendly Mass. And I don't know if that's an option for every parish or not, but I can imagine what a Mass like that would be like. You would probably turn down the volume a little bit, make sure the organ isn't blasting. You would kind of set the stage for, we're here and we understand that there's going to be disruption. Parents may need to walk with their children, in the back of the Mass, maybe allowing a little bit more freedom of movement.
Mm-hmm.
I know that their attention spans are already so short, so maybe the priest for that Mass could be more mindful of his homily and just try to make it shorter, just get to the point, lay it out logically so it's just boom, 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 and then we're done. And then, a Mass like that would just be a place of understanding and welcoming. That'd be a pretty great thing, actually.
Now, I imagine if a parish is even thinking about that, well, let's take one of our existing Masses and let's try to make it more sensory friendly. Reduce the music, let's lower the lights. The default assumption might be, let's do that with our least attended Mass. Let's do that with our earliest Mass. But I suspect that your response to that would be, well, if it's the 7 a.m. Mass, even if it's the 8 a.m. Mass, that's just not going to be helpful because I cannot get my autistic children up early enough and get out the door and get to a Mass that is that early.
That can be a challenge because the later in the day you get, the more tired the children are going to be, or the more overstimulated they're going to be. You want to get them at that sweet spot, like mid-morning, when they've got a full belly, they haven't been overstimulated, and they're fresh and they're ready to absorb what's going on. The later the Mass is, the more difficult it's going to be for that child to focus because they've been on for the whole morning.
So Carolyn, what would you like to see that you would say a parish could do to make Mass more friendly?
Well, I am on the middle on that one. I can see families wanting to participate more fully and be in the Mass, and I can see others being more comfortable and participating in a separate room as well. To me, I think it should be a family's choice as to which they would want to try to do, and I think both have great possibilities. But it would help if parishes would have resources for the parishioners to understand people with different kinds of disabilities. So if information is provided and parishioners take the time to learn about that, I think that would be a really big help.
Okay, so Nick and Amy, do we want to talk a little bit about religious education?
I definitely think that religious education programs need to be educated on the needs of children who are autistic, and frankly, anyone who has a developmental or learning disability. And I've been seeing more that there are programs now specifically geared towards children who are on the autism spectrum.
This is the confirmation version of the adaptive confirmation preparation kit.
I've looked at that and reviewed it, and I was really impressed by it. So that's an easy way to accommodate children. But the experiential aspect of learning and preparing for a sacrament, where they get to see and do and touch. One thing I would do to prepare the kids for First Communion is we would take a tour of the sanctuary and of the sacristy. And they would get a chance to touch and to hold and to see the different vessels that we use in the Mass. And for First Reconciliation, I would take them all inside the confessional so they could see what the lay of the land is in there, how they can kneel behind the screen or they can sit across from the priest. And so that type of like full sensory learning, I think that's huge for all kids, but it's especially helpful for children who are on the autism spectrum.
Let's say you're at a parish where they are in the typical classroom. What are some ways that they can at least be more accommodating to kids that have more sensory issues?
One thing that we've done with Dominic is we asked for a classroom helper, and that could be like a volunteer adult or maybe an older, like responsible teenager who can be there as a help specifically for Dominic. So he has someone who can be with him one-on-one and help him understand the directions for an activity that they're doing or answer his questions, which I think is really needed and helpful for him.
Carolyn, what is your experience with bringing your child for a sacramental prep?
We waited until we felt he was a little bit older. So when we thought he was ready, we approached the religious education director and said, our child, you're just not going to be able to handle him in a regular class. So we asked if we could homeschool him using a good curriculum, then have him come in and talk to you and the pastor and figure out if he's well prepared enough. They were very accommodating and agreed with that. I actually found a curriculum from a leading Catholic magazine that covered all the basic facts. People with autism are very literal. A lot of symbolic stories are very lost on them. So it was a very good, concise preparation. And the religious people were very, very pleased with that. And they also gave us videos. He learns very well with videos, like many people with autism. And that really helped a lot of the lessons sink in, the videos they provided. So he met with the pastor and he just wanted to make sure that he understood the basic ideas of what was going on. And then he was able to receive the sacraments. So we really liked having that option of doing the homeschooling with the parish's guidance.
Let's show everyone some resources that are available for people. First of all, there is a document out by the USCCB, Guidelines for the Celebration of the Sacraments with Persons with Disabilities, Revised Edition 2017. Just Google Disabilities USCCB document. You can order that or you can just download it directly from the web. I also should not fail to mention the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, the NCPD, a Catholic organization, of course, that has lots of resources for catechists and parishes. On that website, among other things, you can find many resources where I can't possibly go through. Among them, I know Loyola Press in particular has come out with adaptive reconciliation kits, an adaptive First Eucharist preparation kit, and an adaptive confirmation preparation kit. These are kits for individuals with autism and other special needs, and they have some other resources like that available as well. Another great idea is the VLCFF, the Virtual Learning Community for Faith Formation at the University of Dayton. Those are online courses that you can take in Disabilities and Parish Life Overview, and that is a prerequisite for the Autism and Faith Formation course you have here. But there are 6 different courses available. These are all online courses that you can take that we would recommend for DREs and other catechists. Also, the University of Dayton Institute for Pastoral Initiatives. If you just Google the University of Dayton Pastoral Initiatives, you will get that website. And from there, find this whole list of online Catholic resources or a whole listing of sacramental preparation books, because there are ways that we can be accommodating for families who have children with disabilities and, of course, still deserve preparation for the sacrament. Thank you for talking with us about your experiences with autism, with children on the spectrum. The big thing we hope that we get out of this is that people gain a better understanding of the issues that some families have, so that when they bring their children to church, they can expect to feel welcomed. They can expect people to say, I'm really glad glad that you're trying to raise your kids in the faith. And I hope that you understand that I am glad you're trying, and I know that you're doing your best.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, no problem. Glad to do it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it, and we're glad to help.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me attend today, and I really appreciate being able to talk to you about this.
Thank you for sharing your time with us on this Being Pro-Life series.